She walked in, wearing nursing scrubs and weary eyes, just a mother pleading for her son. The dean smirked, humiliated her, and called security to throw her out. But what no one knew, she was the billionaire owner of the school's funding foundation. By the end of the day, the board was fired, and jaws were on the floor. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story is already hitting home, hit that like button. We're just getting started. It was a cold Monday morning on the prestigious campus of Wadsworth Preparatory Academy. The air itself felt expensive, filled with the scent of old money and freshly cut grass. Inside the administration building, the silence was heavy, broken only by the quiet hum of a computer. Dean Richard Hollowell sat behind a long mahogany desk that seemed to stretch the length of the room. He was a man in his 50s, dressed in a suit so sharp it could have cut glass. Everything about him was polished, from his gleaming shoes to the smug smile that rarely left his face. He leaned back in his leather chair, a picture of absolute authority. Across from him, in a simple wooden chair that felt a mile away, sat 17-year-old Marcus Carter. Marcus was a quiet, polite boy, but today his shoulders were slumped and his head was low. The confidence he usually carried himself with was gone, replaced by a visible, trembling anxiety. He stared at his own hands, unable to meet the dean's cold gaze. Standing beside him, a protective hand resting gently on his shoulder, was his mother, Dana Carter. She wore pale blue nursing scrubs, the fabric slightly rumpled. Her eyes were tired, betraying the fact that she had just come from a long night shift at the city hospital. She looked out of place in this opulent office, a fact the dean seemed to enjoy. Dean Hollowell held a thin folder in his hands, tapping it lightly on the polished surface of his desk. The sound was like a small, rhythmic judgment. He hadn't even bothered to open it. He didn't need to. In his mind, the case was already closed. "The situation is quite simple, Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice smooth but laced with an unmistakable condescension. "Your son, Marcus, was caught cheating on his history final. Professor Albright is one of our most decorated educators. His word is, frankly, beyond question." Dana's posture remained straight. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and even, a stark contrast to the dean's dismissive tone. "With all due respect, Dean Hollowell," she said, "I have seen the test. Marcus studied for weeks. I quizzed him myself. Can you show me the evidence? How exactly did he cheat?" The dean let out a short, airy laugh, as if the question itself was absurd. He waved a hand, flicking away her concern like a piece of lint. "Evidence? My dear woman, we don't operate like a courtroom here. Wadsworth is built on a foundation of integrity. When a teacher of Professor Albright's caliber reports an infraction, we act on it. We don't have time to indulge in baseless appeals." He looked directly at Marcus, his smile tightening. "Your son doesn't belong here. It's become clear he can't keep up with our standards. We have a certain caliber of student we aim to cultivate." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken prejudice. He wasn't just talking about academic standards. He was talking about class, about background, about the fact that Dana stood before him in scrubs and not a designer pantsuit. Dana felt a fire ignite deep within her, a hot, protective anger, but she kept her voice steady, her resolve like steel. "My son is one of the top students in his year. He earned his scholarship through hard work, not charity. You can't just expel him based on a baseless accusation." She took a step forward, her presence suddenly filling more of the room. "I am asking you, as his mother, to conduct a proper investigation." The dean's smugness finally cracked, replaced by a flash of irritation. He saw her not as a concerned parent, but as an obstacle. He thought of the wealthy donors he had to appease, the powerful parents who expected the school to maintain its pristine, exclusive image. This woman, with her tired eyes and her simple uniform, was a nuisance. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. "You people never learn, do you? You push and you push, thinking the rules don't apply to you. His gaze was filled with a deep-seated arrogance. He believed he was untouchable, the king in his castle of brick and ivy. He pressed a small black button on the intercom system on his desk. His voice returned to its full, authoritative volume. "Security. I have a disruptive parent in my office who needs to be escorted from the premises." The office staff outside, who had been trying their best not to listen, suddenly went still. Heads popped up over cubicle walls. The secretary's fingers froze over her keyboard. This was an escalation no one had expected. Dana didn't flinch. She simply looked at the dean, a profound disappointment in her eyes. "You are making a mistake," she said, her voice no more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of a promise. Within moments, 2 uniformed security guards appeared at the doorway. They looked uncomfortable, glancing from the powerful dean to the calm woman in the scrubs. "This woman is being difficult," Dean Hollowell announced, gesturing toward Dana. "Please see that she leaves campus immediately." He stood up, smoothing down his tie, his victory assured. He had put the working-class mother in her place. He had reinforced the school's unwritten rules. Marcus finally looked up, his face a mask of shock and shame. He saw the guards approach his mother. He saw the smirking faces of the office staff. He felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. But as the guards gently motioned for Dana to leave, she locked eyes with her son. Her expression was not one of defeat. It was one of fierce, unyielding love. She held his gaze and spoke her final words to the dean, her voice so clear and steady that it cut through the tense silence of the room. "You just made a mistake," she repeated. "One you will regret before the sun sets today." Outside the heavy oak doors of the dean's office, the hallway was buzzing with quiet activity. Students on their way to class and staff members moving between offices slowed their pace, their curiosity piqued. They saw the 2 campus security guards flanking Dana Carter, their postures stiff and apologetic. It was a scene that simply did not happen at Wadsworth. Whispers erupted like small brush fires as she was led toward the main entrance. People gawked openly, their faces a mixture of surprise and morbid fascination. Dean Hollowell stood in the doorway of his office, watching the spectacle he had created. A sense of profound satisfaction washed over him. He felt powerful, decisive. He had protected the sanctity of his institution from someone who, in his mind, simply did not belong. He crossed his arms, a smug, proud look on his face, as he made sure everyone saw him overseeing the removal. He was making an example of her, and he wanted all to see. Inside the office, Marcus was left behind, frozen in the chair. The dean hadn't even given him a second glance. The boy was just a prop in the man's power play. Marcus watched his mother go, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a knot of shame and anger tighten in his stomach. He had been humiliated, and now his mother was being publicly shamed for defending him. Dana did not resist. She didn't argue or raise her voice. She walked with a calm, deliberate grace, her head held high. She knew that any display of anger would only feed the narrative the dean was trying to write. She was not a difficult or disruptive woman. She was a mother on a mission. As she passed a group of students, their phones were already out, discreetly recording the scene. She ignored them. Her focus was singular. Just before she reached the final set of doors leading outside, she paused and looked back down the long hallway. She found her son's eyes one last time, still watching her from inside the dean's office. She offered him a small, almost imperceptible nod, and mouthed 2 simple words, "Trust me." A flicker of hope ignited in Marcus's chest. He didn't understand, but he knew his mother. He knew that look. It was the same look she gave him before he took a big test, or before a championship game. It was a look that said, "I've got this." The security guards themselves seemed torn. One was a younger man who avoided her eyes entirely, his face flushed with embarrassment. The other was older, with kind eyes that held a hint of apology. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the older guard mumbled as he held the door open for her. "Just following orders." Dana gave him a brief, understanding nod. I know, she said softly. Her fight wasn't with them. As she walked, the whispers followed her like a shadow. A teacher standing by a classroom door. Miss Gable, muttered to a colleague just loud enough for Dana to hear. That's what happens when you don't know your place. The comment was sharp, and it stung, but Dana didn't let it show. She absorbed the insult, filed it away. It was just another piece of data, another confirmation of the sickness that had taken root in this school. The heavy glass doors of the administration building finally swung shut behind her, the sound echoing her temporary banishment. The world outside was cold and gray, matching the chill of the morning's events. For a moment, she stood on the pristine stone steps, the grand architecture of Wadsworth looming behind her like a monument to arrogance. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs. There was no anger on her face. There was no panic in her movements. There was only a quiet, focused resolve. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out her phone. It was a simple, unassuming device, but in that moment, it was the most powerful weapon on campus. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen, dialing a number from memory. The call connected almost instantly. A professional, no-nonsense voice answered on the other end. Future Fund Oversight. How can I help you? Dana's voice was calm, clinical. The weariness from her night shift was gone, replaced by the sharp clarity of a commander. This is Dana Carter, she said. I need an emergency audit team sent to Wadsworth Preparatory Academy. Not tomorrow, not this afternoon. Today. The world seemed to melt away, the cold campus sidewalk replaced by the polished floors of a boardroom 2 years prior. The memory was vivid, a sharp contrast to her current reality. She wasn't in rumpled scrubs, she was in a sharp navy blue power suit that was tailored to perfection. Her hair was styled, her demeanor commanding. She stood at the head of a massive conference table, the kind made from a single piece of rare, dark wood. Seated around it were not tired nurses or anxious students, but some of the most powerful people in the country. There were 2 United States senators, the CEOs of 3 Fortune 500 companies, and the trustees of several prestigious universities. They were all listening to her, their gazes fixed on her with a mixture of respect and awe. This was Dana Carter, in her true element. This was where she held court. In this world, she wasn't just Marcus's mother. She was the founder and majority stakeholder of the Future Fund, a billion-dollar philanthropic organization that had quietly become one of the most influential forces in modern education. The Future Fund didn't just write checks, it reshaped institutions from the ground up. It underwrote scholarships for tens of thousands of students. It built state-of-the-art charter schools in underserved communities, and, most importantly, it provided critical, often anonymous funding to elite prep schools that were struggling to stay afloat in a changing world. Schools just like Wadsworth Preparatory Academy. Dana had made a conscious decision to keep her role a secret. The world knew the Future Fund was run by a mysterious, private benefactor, known only by the initials DC, but her identity was the best-kept secret in philanthropy. She had her reasons, deeply personal and fiercely protected. She wanted her son, Marcus, to have a normal life. She wanted him to earn his place in the world on his own merits, not to be carried through it on a river of his mother's money. She had seen what wealth and privilege did to children, how it could warp their sense of reality and rob them of their ambition. She wanted Marcus to be grounded, to understand the value of hard work, to know what it was like to be judged for the content of his character, not the size of his mother's bank account. So she had constructed a different life for them. They lived in a modest home in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, far from the gated communities of the Wadsworth elite. She continued to work part-time as a registered nurse, a job she had loved long before the money came. The work kept her connected to the real world, to the struggles and triumphs of everyday people. It kept her humble, and it provided the perfect cover. No one at Wadsworth ever looked at the tired nurse in scrubs and saw a billionaire. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see, a working-class single mother trying to give her son a better life. For 2 years the plan had worked perfectly. Marcus thrived at Wadsworth. He made friends, excelled in his classes, and earned the respect of his teachers, all on his own. He was a scholarship kid, and he was proud of it. He never suspected that the anonymous foundation providing that scholarship was, in fact, his own mother. Dana had watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. She attended parent-teacher conferences, baked for bake sales, and cheered from the bleachers at his basketball games, all while blending into the background. But today, everything had changed. The system she had trusted to be fair, the institution she was secretly funding, had turned on her son. It hadn't been about merit or evidence. It had been about prejudice. Dean Hollowell had looked at her, and Marcus, and seen, "You people." He had humiliated her son and thrown her off campus based on nothing more than classist, racist assumptions. The quiet anger that had been simmering inside her now hardened into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. Her experiment in anonymity was over. She had tried to give her son a normal life, but the world wouldn't let him have one. It had judged him not for who he was, but for what they thought he was. A quiet fire burned in her eyes. It was time to show them who she was. The time for hiding was over. The time to act was now. Her son's dignity was on the line, and she would move heaven and earth to restore it. Back in the present, standing on the sidewalk just beyond the wrought iron gates of the campus, Dana's mind was a whirlwind of strategic thought. She reflected on the precise reasons she had gone to such great lengths to conceal her identity. It wasn't just about Marcus having a normal childhood. It was also about self-preservation. Being a billionaire was one thing. Being a black woman billionaire was something else entirely. She knew, with a certainty born of experience, that revealing her wealth would have made her and Marcus targets. They would be subject to a constant barrage of attention, some of it well-meaning, much of it exploitative. There would be endless requests for money, fawning sycophants pretending to be friends, and the ever-present danger of those who would seek to harm them for their fortune. By living a low-profile life, she had created a shield. It allowed Marcus to form genuine friendships, to be seen for his quick wit and kind heart. It allowed people to treat him based on the person he was, not the name on his mother's foundation. The irony was bitter. She had hidden her power to protect him from prejudice, only to have him become a victim of a different kind of prejudice, the kind that looked down on a boy with a scholarship and a mother who worked night shifts. The very identity she had crafted for their safety had been used as a weapon against them. But her secret life had given her more than just anonymity. It had given her an unparalleled view from the ground. As a Wadsworth parent, she had seen the school's inner workings up close. She had heard the whispers in the hallways, listened to the casual condescension of certain teachers, and felt the unspoken social hierarchy that governed the Parent-Teacher Association. She knew exactly where the rot was, and now she was ready to cut it out. Dana walked to her car, a practical and unassuming sedan, and slid into the driver's seat. She didn't drive home. Instead, she drove to a small, quiet park a few blocks away. Taking out a sleek encrypted laptop from a hidden compartment under the seat, she logged into her secure terminal. This was her real office, a digital fortress accessible only to her. With a few keystrokes, she bypassed the public-facing websites and accessed the deep, internal architecture of the Future Fund. Her screen filled with documents that no one outside her inner circle had ever seen. There were the detailed funding agreements with Wadsworth Preparatory Academy, filled with clauses and subclauses she had written herself. There were the codes of conduct that every board member and administrator had been required to sign, and there were the complete employment contracts for every senior staff member at the school, including one Dean Richard Hollowell. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her movements precise and efficient. She was no longer just a nurse or a mother. She was a tactician preparing for battle. She reviewed Clause 7 of the funding agreement, the one the lawyers had called her nuclear option. It was a clause that allowed for an immediate, unilateral assumption of oversight power in the event of a gross ethical breach or a violation of the student due process policy. Dean Hollow's actions that morning had triggered it in spectacular fashion. He just didn't know it yet. With the relevant documents open in separate windows, she began to draft a single-page executive order. The language was cold, legal, and irrefutable. It cited the specific violations, named the individuals involved, and invoked the full power vested in her as the ultimate authority behind the future fund. She wasn't just planning to fire the dean, she was planning to dismantle the entire power structure that had allowed a man like him to flourish. She read over the draft one last time, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. A quiet, determined smile touched her lips. Dean Hollowell thought he had gotten rid of a nuisance. He had no idea he had just awakened a giant. Inside the grand, hushed administration building of Wadsworth, life was returning to its normal, placid rhythm. The minor drama of the morning was already fading into campus gossip. But in a small, cramped office tucked away behind the dean's lavish suite, one person could not forget. 23-year-old Olivia Reynolds, the dean's personal assistant, sat staring at her computer screen, her hands trembling slightly. She had been there for the entire meeting. She had been the one to bring Marcus Carter up from the student waiting area. She had heard every word of the dean's condescending speech, had seen the flash of panic and hurt in Marcus's eyes, and had watched as Dana Carter was unjustly escorted out like a criminal. But Olivia knew something that made the injustice cut even deeper. She knew the dean was lying. He had claimed the cheating accusation was airtight, based on the unwavering word of Professor Albright. But Olivia handled all of the dean's scheduling and paperwork. Just last week, she had been the one to file the official grade reports for the history final. She had seen the original test scores with her own eyes. Marcus hadn't just passed. He had scored a 98, one of the highest marks in the entire grade. There was no cheating accusation from Professor Albright on file. There was no report. There was nothing. The dean had invented the entire story. Olivia's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and outrage. She had only been working at Wadsworth for 6 months, but it had been long enough to see how Dean Hollow operated. He was a master of manipulation, a petty tyrant who thrived on power and the subjugation of those he deemed beneath him. She knew he had a particular disdain for the scholarship students, seeing them as a blemish on the school's otherwise pristine pedigree. He had likely targeted Marcus simply to make a point. A chilling realization washed over her. She was an accomplice, in a way. Her silence made her part of the lie. But what could she do? She was a young assistant, barely making enough to cover her student loans. Dean Hollowell could fire her without a second thought, ruin her reputation before her career had even begun. Fear told her to stay quiet, to delete what she knew, and pretend she had seen nothing. But then she thought of Marcus's face, the quiet dignity in his posture even as he was being torn down. And she thought of his mother, Dana, standing up to the dean, with a strength that Olivia could only admire. She couldn't let it stand. With a newfound resolve, Olivia began to move. Her hands, which had been trembling with fear, were now steady with purpose. She opened the school's internal security server. As the dean's assistant, she had administrative access. She located the footage from the camera inside the dean's office, from earlier that morning. The audio was crystal clear. She saved a copy of the entire confrontation to a secure, personal cloud drive. Next, she navigated to the faculty records server. She found the grade submission portal and took a screenshot of the history final scores, clearly showing Marcus Carter's name next to the grade of 98. She printed a hard copy for good measure. Finally, she went through the dean-sent emails from the past week. It didn't take long to find what she was looking for. An email to Professor Albright from 2 days ago. It read, "Albright, I need you to back me on a disciplinary issue with Marcus Carter. I'm handling it internally. Just nod along if asked. Your loyalty will be noted. It was the smoking gun, the proof of a conspiracy. Olivia saved everything. She created a digital folder and protected it with a password. She made copies on a small encrypted thumb drive that she slipped into her pocket. She didn't know who she would give this information to, or how she would use it, but she knew she had to do something. She had seen everything, and she had made a silent choice. She was going to back Dana Carter. She was going to be ready to blow the whistle. Later that afternoon, the school library was a sanctuary of silence. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Marcus Carter sat alone at a heavy oak table in a secluded corner, a book open in front of him. He hadn't turned a page in over an hour. His mind was a chaotic storm of replays from the morning. The dean's sneering face, his mother being led away by security, the curious and judgmental stares of his classmates. He felt a profound sense of isolation, as if the entire world had turned against him. He had been publicly branded a cheater, and the one person who believed in him had been thrown off campus. A quiet voice pulled him from his thoughts. Mark, he looked up to see a young woman with kind, nervous eyes standing by his table. He recognized her vaguely as the dean's assistant. "I'm Olivia Reynolds," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She glanced around the cavernous library, ensuring no one was watching. "I work for Dean Holloway. I was there this morning. I wanted you to know that I believe you." Marcus stared at her, confused. Why would the dean's own assistant be talking to him? He was wary, unsure if this was some new kind of trap. "Thank you," he said cautiously, his voice hoarse. Olivia wrung her hands, her nervousness evident. "It's more than that," she said, leaning in closer. "What the dean said, it wasn't true. None of it. He lied." She reached into her pocket and discreetly slid a small black thumb drive across the table. "This is proof," she whispered. "Proof that you're innocent. Proof of what he did." Marcus looked down at the thumb drive, then back up at her, his confusion deepening. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Olivia offered him a small, sad smile. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I think you're going to need it." She paused for a moment, then added a sentence that would echo in Marcus's mind for the rest of the day. "Your mother's not who they think she is." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Olivia gave him a quick nod and walked away, disappearing into the maze of bookshelves. Marcus was left alone again, this time with a tiny piece of plastic in his hand that held the key to his future, and a cryptic message about his mother that made no sense at all. Meanwhile, a few miles away from the quiet library, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. In the far corner of a Target parking lot, 4 sleek, black sedans pulled in and parked in a neat row. Out of them stepped 8 people, 4 men and 4 women, all dressed in immaculate business suits. They looked like corporate lawyers or federal agents. They were Dana Carter's emergency audit team, the best of the best, flown in on a private jet that afternoon. They moved with a swift, silent efficiency, gathering around the lead auditor, a sharp-eyed woman named Maria. Maria looked at her tablet, then addressed the group. "All right, team, you have the files. We are initiating a full-spectrum financial and ethics audit of Wadsworth Preparatory Academy, effective immediately. We'll start with the endowment funds, then move to administrative payroll and expense accounts." She looked up, her gaze sweeping over her team. "Our orders come from the top. We move fast, we are thorough, and we are discreet. Don't tell them who sent you. Not yet. Let them wonder." The team nodded in unison, their faces grim and determined. They got back into their cars and one by one, pulled out of the parking lot, heading directly for the unsuspecting campus of Wadsworth Academy. The reckoning was about to begin. While the auditors descended upon his school, Dean Richard Hollowell was having a wonderful afternoon. He was the guest of honor at a Parent-Teacher Association luncheon, held in a private dining room at an exclusive local country club. The room was filled with the soft clinking of silverware on china, and the gentle hum of polite, wealthy conversation. The dean sat at the head of the main table, basking in the admiration of the school's most influential parents. He felt invincible. The incident with the Carter woman that morning, far from being a problem, had become a point of pride. It was a story he was now dining out on. "It is my duty," he said, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin, "to uphold the rigorous standards that have made Wadsworth the finest preparatory school in the state. We simply cannot afford to lower the bar for anyone, regardless of their circumstances." His words were vague, but everyone at the table knew exactly who he was talking about. He was referring to Marcus Carter, the scholarship boy, whose mother had dared to challenge his authority. A ripple of appreciative laughter went around the table. These were parents who paid $60,000 a year in tuition. They liked hearing about standards. It made them feel like their investment was being protected. One of the trustees, a portly man named Mr. Harrington, whose family had been donating to Wadsworth for generations, clapped the dean heartily on the back. "Good on you, Richard," he boomed. "Got to keep the riffraff out. That's what we pay you for." The dean beamed, his chest puffing out. This was his world. These were his people. They understood the delicate balance required to maintain an institution like Wadsworth. They understood that sometimes you had to be firm. He took a sip of his expensive wine, gloating internally. He imagined the scene, the working-class mother, utterly defeated, complaining to her friends about the injustice of it all. He pictured her son, Marcus, packing his bags, his brief foray into the world of the elite, coming to an ignominious end. The thought filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. This incident, he believed, had only boosted his status. It showed the board and the wealthy parents that he was a strong leader, unafraid to make the tough decisions necessary to protect the Wadsworth brand. He was a guardian at the gate, and he had just repelled a barbarian. He had no idea what was happening back on his own campus. He had no idea that a team of forensic accountants was already inside the administration's server room, cloning hard drives and pulling financial records that went back a decade. He had no idea that his official school email account was being monitored, or that the very phone calls he made from his desk were being legally recorded under the authority of the institution's true owner. And he certainly had no idea that the Future Fund, the school's largest and most mysterious benefactor, was quietly convening a special emergency session of its highest oversight committee, all without his knowledge or consent. He just sat there, laughing and accepting praise, completely oblivious to the fact that the castle he believed he was ruling was in fact a house of cards, and the wind was starting to pick up. Later that afternoon, back in the familiar comfort of his own office, Dean Hollowell was feeling magnanimous. The successful luncheon had left him in high spirits, and he decided to share his wisdom with his faculty. He called a last-minute staff meeting in the school's small auditorium. The teachers filed in, some looking curious, others looking annoyed at the interruption to their day. The dean stood at the podium, radiating confidence and authority. "I'll keep this brief," he began, "but I feel it's important we're all on the same page regarding this morning's unpleasantness." He proceeded to give a condescending and self-serving version of his confrontation with Dana Carter. He painted himself as the calm, rational administrator, forced to deal with an emotional, hysterical parent. He warned the faculty not to speak to anyone about the incident, especially not the press, should they come calling. It was a simple disciplinary matter that was handled swiftly and professionally, he said, his voice smooth as silk. There is no need for further discussion. He then leaned into the microphone, a conspiratorial smirk on his face. He referred to Dana, a registered nurse who worked tirelessly to save lives, as that cleaning lady. The term was meant to diminish her, to strip her of her dignity and profession, and to place her firmly at the bottom of the social ladder he held so dear. A few of the more sycophantic teachers chuckled, eager to align themselves with his power. After the meeting, he was walking down the hallway with Professor Albright, the history teacher he had implicated in his lie. Albright looked nervous. "Richard," he said in a low voice, "are you sure about this?" My name is attached to this expulsion. What if she? The dean cut him off with a dismissive laugh. What if she? What, Robert? What is she going to do? Start a GoFundMe? Write a strongly worded blog post? Please. He felt a surge of arrogant pity for the woman. She was powerless. She couldn't touch him. He gestured around at the stately ivy-covered buildings visible through the hallway window. This is Wadsworth Preparatory Academy, he said, his voice filled with pride. It has been here for 150 years. It has educated senators, judges, and titans of industry. It is an institution, Robert. It is untouchable. He clapped the professor on the shoulder. His confidence absolute. Nobody is going to touch us. Especially not some angry woman in scrubs. By tomorrow, she'll be forgotten. He felt a supreme confidence in the durability of his world, in the thick walls of tradition and money that protected him. He truly believed he was invincible, that the power structures he served would insulate him from any consequences. As he finished his sentence feeling like the king of the world, he failed to notice the small group of men and women in dark business suits, who walked quietly past his office door. They didn't look at him. They just kept moving, their faces set with grim purpose, heading directly for the school's financial records office. The auditors had arrived, and the untouchable fortress of Wadsworth was about to have its foundations inspected. While Dean Hollow was busy reassuring his staff of his own invincibility, Dana Carter was standing in her modest kitchen. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating a home filled not with wealth, but with love. There were crayon drawings from Marcus's childhood, taped to the refrigerator. A stack of well-worn library books sat on the counter. She was still in her nursing scrubs. She hadn't changed. The uniform was a reminder of who she was at her core. A caregiver, a protector, but in her hand, she held the phone that connected her to a different world. A world of immense power and influence. She had spent the last few hours monitoring the initial reports from her audit team. The preliminary findings were worse than she had imagined. There were signs of financial mismanagement, bloated expense accounts, and a slush fund for special projects that seemed to have no oversight whatsoever. It was a culture of entitlement, run by a man who believed he was above the rules. It was time to end it. She took a deep breath, calming her nerves, focusing her mind. Then, she dialed a private, encrypted number. It was a direct line, one that bypassed secretaries and assistants, connecting her to the very highest level of her organization. A calm, professional woman's voice answered on the first ring. Pentagon Foundation Oversight Division. The name was a code name, chosen for its implication of impenetrable security and strategic power. "This is Dana Carter," she said, her voice low and steady. There was a pause on the other end, a moment of recognition. The woman on the line knew exactly who was calling. The use of her full name was a signal that this was not a routine check-in. This was an executive command. "I am officially invoking Clause 7 of the Wadsworth Endowment Agreement," Dana continued, her words precise and deliberate. "I want a full review of the Board of Trustees, effective immediately." The summons arrived via a priority-level encrypted email, with less than 60 minutes' notice. It was blunt, commanding, and mysterious. The entire Wadsworth Board of Trustees was being called to an emergency meeting. No reason was given. The sender was listed only as future fund oversight. Dean Richard Hollowell received the notification while he was on the phone, laughing with a colleague about his plans for the weekend. The abruptness of the summons annoyed him. He saw it as a bureaucratic nuisance, probably a routine check-in from the anonymous donors who provided so much of the school's funding. He grumbled about it to his secretary, straightened his tie, and made his way to the main boardroom, assuming he would be in and out in half an hour. She entered the room not with a roar, but with a quiet, deliberate grace that commanded more attention than any shout ever could. This was not the woman they had thrown off campus that morning. Dana Carter didn't acknowledge him. She walked to the head of the table, the empty space that was reserved for the highest authority, and placed a leather portfolio down on the polished wood. The sound echoed in the silent room. She turned her gaze on the assembled board, her expression unreadable. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and even, yet carrying an undeniable weight of command. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dana Carter." She let the name hang in the air for a moment, before continuing. "I am the founder and principal stakeholder of the Future Fund. Which means, for all intents and purposes, I am the person who signs your checks." A wave of shock and dawning horror washed across the faces of the board members. The color drained from Dean Hollowell's face. His mouth opened slightly but no words came out. The pen he had been holding slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the table. It sounded like a gunshot. Dana began to calmly lay out the timeline of events. "This morning," she said, her voice never rising, "my son, a scholarship student at this academy, was falsely accused of cheating by your dean of students. He was subjected to humiliation without a shred of evidence. When I, his mother, attempted to advocate for him and requested that you follow your own due process, I was verbally abused, belittled, and physically escorted from this campus." She then turned her steely gaze from the dean to the board members. "You took money from the Future Fund. You signed agreements filled with clauses protecting the rights and dignities of every student, regardless of their background. Today, your leadership has shown that those agreements mean nothing to you." At that moment, Olivia Reynolds stood up and walked to the head of the table. She opened a laptop and turned it to face the board. On the screen was the email from Dean Hollowell to Professor Albright, asking him to lie. Olivia then handed Dana a stack of papers. It was the documentation, the grade reports, the security footage transcripts. Dana didn't even look at it. She looked directly at the board. "By the terms of your funding contract, your failure to ensure ethical conduct and due process constitutes a material breach." She tapped a finger on the leather portfolio. "That breach triggers Clause 7. It grants me full and immediate controlling interest in this institution. As of this moment, your authority is rescinded." She paused, letting the weight of her words crush them. "Today, I am reclaiming it, and my first act as the new head of this board is to inform you all that you are fired." The words hung in the air, final and absolute. Fired. All of them. The board members sat in stunned, pale-faced silence. They looked like statues, their expressions frozen in a mixture of shock and disbelief. The world they knew, a world of privilege, power, and impunity, had just been shattered by a woman they had dismissed without a second thought. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then, the lead compliance officer, Maria, stood up. "Security," she said calmly into a small radio. The door opened, and a new set of guards entered. Not the campus security, but professional agents from Dana's own firm. One by one, the board members were asked to gather their personal belongings and leave the premises. They were escorted out, their faces a mixture of shame, anger, and utter humiliation. Mr. Harrington, the man who had been so smug at lunch, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He tried to protest, to bluster about his family's legacy, but a single cold stare from Dana silenced him completely. He was marched out of the room like a common trespasser. When the room was finally cleared of the disgraced trustees, only one target remained. Dean Richard Hollowell. "And now for you, Mr. Hollowell," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "Your employment contract, it contained a morality clause and a strict requirement to adhere to the school's own due process policies." She gestured toward the laptop that Olivia still had open. "You violated both, in the most egregious way possible." On the large screen at the end of the boardroom, which Olivia now controlled, a series of exhibits began to play. First, the audio from the morning's meeting. The entire room heard the dean's condescending tone, his sneering dismissal of Dana's pleas. They heard him say, "You people never learn." Next, an image of his email to Professor Albright, the one asking him to lie, filled the screen. It was followed by testimonies from other students who had been unfairly targeted by the dean in the past, stories Olivia had quietly gathered. Finally, there were audio clips from the faculty meeting and the PTA luncheon, secretly recorded by members of Dana's team who had been on campus all day. The board members might be gone, but the evidence of their complicity was now laid bare. The room heard him call Dana a cleaning lady. They heard him brag about upholding standards by getting rid of a scholarship student. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and utterly damning. Dana let the final damning audio clip fade into silence. She looked the dean directly in the eye. The man who had seemed so powerful just hours before now looked small, pathetic, and broken. You used your position to bully a child. You lied to protect your own ego, and you judged my family based on the clothes I wore, not the content of our character. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, powerful tone that held all the fury she had suppressed throughout the day. "You are fired," she said, the words cutting through the air like a knife, effective immediately. "Your credentials will be revoked, and a full report of this investigation will be sent to every educational body in this country. You will never work with children again." She nodded toward the door. Security. The main boardroom doors opened one last time. In walked the two campus security guards from that morning, the same two men who had escorted Dana out. Their faces were grim. They understood now. They walked up to the frozen, speechless Dean Holloway. As the disgraced dean was marched away, the tension in the boardroom finally broke. A sense of quiet justice settled over the room. Dana Carter stood at the head of the table, not as a vengeful victor, but as a restorer of order. Her work was not just about punishment, it was about rebuilding. She turned her attention to the one person in the room who had shown courage and integrity when it mattered most. "Olivia," she said, her voice now warm and full of respect. Olivia Reynolds looked up. Her eyes wide. She had just been a witness to one of the most incredible displays of power she could ever imagine. "You saw an injustice, and you did not stay silent," Dana continued, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "You stood up when it counted, even at great personal risk. That is the definition of leadership. This school needs more people like you." Dana paused, letting her next words sink in. "Effective immediately. I am promoting you. You will no longer be an assistant. I'm making you the new executive administrator of Wadsworth Academy, with full authority to oversee daily operations until a new permanent leadership team is in place." Olivia was speechless. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just yesterday, she was a nervous young assistant, afraid of losing her job. Now she was being handed the reins of the entire school. At that moment, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it was Marcus who walked in. He had been waiting in an adjoining office, the thumb drive from Olivia in his pocket. He had seen the dean being led away. He had heard the whispers and seen the shocked faces. In the weeks that followed, Wadsworth Preparatory Academy was reborn. The toxic, elitist culture that had festered under Dean Holloway and the old board was systematically dismantled. The change was swift and decisive. Dana Carter, working closely with her new executive administrator, Olivia Reynolds, implemented a sweeping series of reforms. The first order of business was to install a new interim board of trustees, comprised of respected educators, community leaders, and student advocates who believed in fairness and equality. The school's admissions and scholarship policies were completely overhauled. Dana personally endowed a new, multi-million-dollar program specifically designed to find and fund gifted students from underserved and low-income communities. The Dana Carter Opportunity Grant, as it came to be known, ensured that the doors of Wadsworth would now be open to all who had the talent and drive, not just those who had the wealth. Marcus, now free from the false accusations and the weight of the dean's prejudice, excelled. He became a quiet leader on campus, a symbol of the school's new direction. He never boasted about his mother's identity, but a new confidence shone in his eyes. The story of what Dana had done continued to make waves across the country, inspiring countless others. She became a reluctant celebrity, not for her wealth, but for her actions as a mother. She gave a single interview, explaining that her goal was never to be famous, but simply to ensure that every child had the right to a safe and fair education. In a final quiet scene, months after the dramatic takeover, Dana visited the school. She wasn't there for a board meeting or a press conference. She was there to speak to a group of students, the first recipients of her new opportunity grant. She wore a simple dress, no power suit needed. She talked to them about hard work, about believing in themselves, and about overcoming obstacles. After her talk, a young girl with bright, curious eyes raised her hand. "Is it true?" the girl asked, her voice full of awe. "Are you really a billionaire?" The other students leaned in, eager to hear the answer. Dana looked at the young girl, then around at the hopeful faces of all the students she was now helping. A warm, genuine smile lit up her face. "I'm a mother," she said softly. "First. Always. Never judge someone by the uniform they wear, the car they drive, or the color of their skin. The world will always try to put people in boxes, to size them up and dismiss them based on shallow first impressions. Society will often underestimate the quiet ones, the humble ones, the ones who work with their hands and carry their exhaustion in their eyes. But assumptions are a dangerous game. Sometimes, the janitor who cleans the floors owns the entire building. Sometimes, the cleaning lady who empties the trash is the one who signs the billion-dollar checks. And sometimes, the tired nurse in the rumpled scrubs. She's the billionaire who just walked in and changed everything. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.